He spent his early mornings hauling freight through frozen roads. But just a few years later, he was leading one of the most iconic car companies in the world. How does a truck driver become the CEO of Volvo? You're about to find out. This is the story of Pehr G. Gyllenhammar, a man who didn't come from wealth or privilege, but from grit and cold steel. A man who understood trucks not just from behind a desk, but behind the wheel. And how his journey from the ground up transformed not only his life, but the future of Volvo forever. The year was 1950. Sweden was still healing from the shadows of World War II. And Pehr G. Gyllenhammar, just 15 at the time, was already working part-time in his father's insurance company. But his heart wasn't in boardrooms. It was in motion, in machines. At 19, Pehr got his truck driving license and started working for a local freight company. For most, it was a dead-end job. Long hours, low pay, brutal winters. But Pehr loved every second. He listened to the engines. He felt the weight of the road. And he understood trucks were more than vehicles. They were the bloodline of industry. Years passed, and while most of his peers settled into ordinary lives, Pehr kept moving. He studied economics at Lund University by day and drove trucks at night. He believed you had to understand both ends of the system, the street and the stock market. But the turning point came in 1970. Volvo was in trouble. Profits were slipping, workers were unhappy, and innovation had stalled. Executives in Stockholm were scrambling for a fix. And that's when someone remembered Pehr, the truck guy who now had a sharp head for numbers and a rare empathy for factory workers. At just 40 years old, they made him CEO. Pause. Think about that for a second. A truck driver now sitting at the top of one of the world's biggest automotive empires. Would you trust someone without a typical corporate background to lead your company? Let me know in the comments. But Pehr didn't walk into his office like a king. He walked in like a mechanic. He threw out the old hierarchy. He visited every Volvo factory personally. He sat with welders, assembly line workers, even cafeteria staff, and asked them one question. What would make you proud to work here? The answers changed everything. Pehr pushed Volvo to focus on safety. Real safety, not just slogans. He launched seatbelt innovations, crash testing protocols, and employee safety programs that were unheard of at the time. His decisions didn't always make shareholders happy. In fact, Wall Street hated him for it. Stock prices dipped. Critics called him naive. But Pehr didn't flinch. And then the numbers came in. Within 5 years, Volvo's profits soared. Employee retention hit record highs. Customers began to see the brand as the gold standard of reliability. Volvo was no longer just a car. It was a promise. At one pivotal board meeting, an angry investor asked, "Why are we spending so much on seatbelt development? It's not even mandatory in most countries." Pehr looked him in the eye and said, "Because our customers' lives matter more than quarterly earnings." That silence in the room? That was the sound of a legacy being born. Now pause here. What would you have done in that moment? Stick to your principles or bend to investor pressure? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know. Pehr stayed on as CEO for nearly 24 years. Under his leadership, Volvo didn't just grow, it became respected. And perhaps the most remarkable part? He never forgot where he came from. Even as CEO, he would occasionally visit old trucking yards, shake hands with drivers, ask them how the engines were holding up. And he'd always tell young recruits, "Don't be afraid to start at the bottom, just don't stop climbing." Pehr Gyllenhammar's journey is a reminder that the path to leadership isn't always paved with Ivy League degrees and fancy titles. Sometimes it's the man who's felt the cold steering wheel at 5 a.m., the one who's broken a sweat underneath a truck, who understands what real leadership means. He turned Volvo into a global icon, not by being the smartest guy in the room, but by being the one who listened. So let me ask you, does experience matter more than education and leadership? Or do you need both? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story inspired you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life finance stories that don't just teach, they move you. And if you've ever had to fight your way up from the bottom, I'd love to hear your journey too. Drop it in the comments. Your story matters.